College of Marine Science, University of South Florida. I'm Frank Muller-Karger. I'm one of the instructors, jointly with Mark Luther here next to me, and we're really honored to have you all in our class. So this is being organized jointly with Strong Coast and Maya Trotz, and I have the honor to introduce here Kris-An Hinds, who's going to then introduce the panel for all of you. And Kris-An, hello Kris-An, how are you doing? Is an applied anthropologist who is passionate about bringing community voices into environmental solutions. She is currently a postdoc researcher on the NSF Strong Coast COPE project, that's Coastal Oceans and People, and has worked in Belize for 60 years or more. Her research focuses on creating new ways for community members to visualize and engage with environmental change and explore social and environmental scenarios through virtual reality, 3D modeling, and other ways to have sensory experiences. So she's involved in many other projects. So welcome, Kris-An Hinds. And I think that you're also the chair of the USF anthropology students.
No, not anymore. I am the former chair, so I'm very excited to have been in that role. And thank you, Frank. And yes, I will be the moderator today. So thank you to all of our panelists for attending. Like, these are some of my favorite people in Belize, so I'm incredibly excited to be the moderator today. Just to go over the structure a little bit for those of you who were not here for part one of our Blue Economies, Belize Blue Economies presentations. Each of our panelists will have about 5 minutes. I will be keeping a timer. I know I have some talkers on the call, but we want to ensure that we have enough time for questions and discussion at the end. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Maya, Dr. Trotz, who is going to share her screen and introduce us to the Strong Coast Project.
Strong Coast is about solutions with nature and people. We focus on coral reefs and mangrove forests as nature-based solutions and the co-benefits they provide. We do so in Miami, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Belize. 3 very different places, different coastlines, economies, and relationships with nature. But in all 3 places, reefs and mangroves matter. In Miami, we are thinking about coastlines that have already been heavily shaped by people. In the U.S. Virgin Islands, there are challenges related to high-intensity hurricanes and the widespread loss of ecosystems. And in Belize, the conversation is ripe for managing the coastline. There, communities are facing pressure from development, sea level rise, sargassum, pollution, and storm surge. So the question is not just how to protect the shoreline, but what kind of coastline people want going forward, and whose priorities shape those decisions. We are pushing a very large team to think about convergence research. So this is about interdisciplinary work, community-partnered work, and it is about real capacity sharing. Success is not only about technical performance, it is also about whether people see themselves in the process, whether local knowledge is respected, and whether the benefits actually matter in that place.
So that's just a brief intro to our project. And with that said, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Ms. SELENY Villanueva-POTT. She is the chairperson for the Caye Caulker Village Council, and she's been chair for the past 2 terms. So with that, SELENY, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
How is everybody this morning?
Well, very good. How are you?
Doing good, doing good.
Greetings from
Doing really good.
Caulker.
Morning, Chairlady.
Okay. So just a brief introduction on Caye Caulker, our population size. We have about 4,000 people. Industry, we're heavily dependent on tourism and fishing. Still, fishing is a vital part of our tourism industry. Income for the Caye Caulker village, our primary income continues to be property tax. Though it's tax, it's 60 US per property, it still continues to be our main revenue generator. Apart from that, we do have rentals of booths that we do. What sets us apart from the other villages, though, is that we're fortunate enough to collect our own traffic tickets. This is something other villages are not privy to. We're also able to collect our own liquor license. So unlike other communities, all that income stays on our island. We've also implemented garbage collection. So those are different revenue generators for the Caye Caulker Village Council.
You're breaking up a little bit. I don't know if it's us or is everybody else.
Is that better? Maybe it's my connection. I'm not sure.
I don't know if it's us or is everybody else getting that?
Yeah, I think it might be coming from your end, Selene. There's mild connection issues, but we can hear you for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why, because I'm on my data. Okay, we're a community living next to the barrier reef, which means we're heavily dependent on the barrier reef and its healthiness. So we get food. A lot of our delicacies come from the barrier reef, or lobster or fish, or different fresh dishes. Also, tourism is heavily dependent on the barrier reef, where a lot of our income is still generated from tourism. A lot of the guides do tours, provide services by giving tours to different reserves. As well, fishing, we're heavily dependent on fishing lobster, conch. Those are still income generators for older men because we're still dependent on fishing. So for sure, the healthiness of the reef and us doing our part in protecting the reef, making it sustainable, following through with the open and closed season. Those are things that we need to participate in. Right now, we're feeling the effects of the sargassum. It's coming in very heavily right now, and well, it's just an ever-changing world. The Caye Caulker Marine Reserve, that was established in 1998, and it's managed by the Belize Fisheries Department. This is our small part that we have done in preserving what we can of Caye Caulker. It's still a reserve, it's still there. A lot of greenery is still there, a lot of wildlife is still there. And we've visited lately, and we've seen that under the mangroves there's a lot of small fishes and small lobsters, so it still serves as a natural hatchery for these marine life. Of course, we try to do our part in conserving mangrove, because we know how important the mangroves are for the coastline. And we know that it's also healthy for carbon reduction. Yes, Caye Caulker Forest Reserve. We continue to do our part with the Caye Caulker Group for Environmental Sustainability and the Belize Forestry Department, where we encourage especially the young children and the high schoolers to plant mangroves. It's something that we take seriously. We've seen in areas where we've planted mangroves, we've seen the effects of it, where It helps to hold the land, especially in hurricane season. We've noticed that there's less erosion from wave action. So it's something that we try to encourage a lot. Currently, we are being faced with some issues. I was explaining to Miss Maya, we've been very, very busy on ground. Progress brings problem. With all the development on Caye Caulker, all the expansion that's happening, and in the development, and us being more of a tourism hub, there's interest in Caye Caulker. However, we're having a lot of difficulties right now where it's been a couple of years that we've been trying to secure our 35 properties for the council as assets. However, we've been very fruitile. We can't make progress with this. Until recently, we've made aware that one of our main properties on the main street, which is the police station property, which was donated by an islander. Back in those days, there were very few people who owned acres of Caye Caulker. They used to refer to it as cacao. So they would own acres and acres of cacao, and then as the island started to develop, there would be need for community center, there would be need for police station, for the school. So these different islanders would donate to the development of the community. And this was the case of the police station, where Mr. Valentin Alamina donated a plot of property for the police station. Back then, there wasn't anything formal. We've been trying to secure that property for our council as an asset. However, we've not been able to. Now, we're being threatened. We are being told it's sold. We're not sure if it's just a rumor. We're hoping it is. But these are just some of the problems that we faced with development. And of course, we're asking for some accountability from the government. It's just, I say, growing problems. Hopefully we get some resolution soon. So that's just a small synopsis on what's going on Caye Caulker.
Yeah, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, SELENY won't be able to join us for the full panel today. So I will allow 30 seconds if anyone has any questions for her before she leaves. Any questions? Let me just double check in the chat. Okay. Well, thank you so much for that presentation.
Thank you for having me. We'll be in touch.
Yeah, no,
Sorry,
we'll be in touch. Yeah, no,
Thank
we
you.
appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. So no, absolutely. And then everyone, please ensure to scan that QR code. If you do think of a question later, you can reach out to the Caye Caulker Village Council via there and send them a message. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Our next panelist is Mr. Warren GARBUTT, who has been on the Placencia Village Council since 2013. This is his second term as the chairperson for the Village Council. So with that, I will turn it over to Warren.
Good morning, all, and thank you all for having me. It's a pleasure to share a bit about my beautiful community with you all. Those in attendance, thank you all for joining, my fellow panelists and students. So Placencia is a little smaller than Caye Caulker. We're roughly 2,000 residents, full-time residents. However, there's a huge influx of people that come in on a daily basis for work, almost the same amount. So on any given day, there's 4,000 or 5,000 workers, residents in Placencia, not counting, of course, visitors, tourists all along the peninsula. Placencia was traditionally a fishing community, so there's still quite a bit of fishing done by local residents. About 20 to 30 years ago, Placencia transitioned to tourism. So tourism now, we've seen massive development since then, and we are now predominantly a tourism destination, beach tourism especially. However, similar to Caye Caulker, we depend on the marine environment for our activities, which we offer for our visitors. Placencia Village Council is a little different from Caye Caulker in terms of our income. Our only real income is from liquor license, which is a fee paid by bars, anybody selling alcohol on the peninsula or in Placencia area. There's, by the way, there's two villages on the peninsula, Placencia and Saint Bite. So we're on the southern tip of a 10-mile long peninsula. Liquor license is our main source of income. And we also receive some income from Christmas markets, little fundraisers that we host, the Lobster Fest being the biggest. We do as well collect rental income from some public spaces that we rent to mainly locals, offering them the opportunity as well to sell their goods or do whatever commerce they may see fit. Trade license is something that should come on stream. The legislations are already in place, but we are not fortunate enough yet to collect trade license. So very, very tight budget for Placencia in terms of managing our resources. Like I mentioned earlier, Placencia is extremely dependent on the marine environment, especially. Being a traditional fishing community, residents offers mostly, or those who transition to tourism are scuba divers, fly fishers, snorkelers, activities that are based mostly on the marine side of the environment. There's extremely high number of activities that goes out to mainly two parks that are roughly 10 to 20 miles east of Placencia, the Laughing Bird Key National Park and the Gladden-Spitz Keys Marine Reserve. There's also the Barrier Reef runs the entire length of the coast of Belize, so there's other areas in which other activities, fishing, spear fishing, fly fishing, other sports fish, and basically just island hopping. There's roughly 20 islands just off the immediate coast of Placencia, and all of them are visited. Most of them are privately owned, but they're visited heavily still by the activities from Placencia. Our biggest challenge in the community, I would say, is the changes we've seen in our coastline. Like was mentioned earlier by the previous speaker, Ms. SELENY, sargassum is an extremely huge problem to us just because of the difficulties in removing it, the lack of resources to address that issue. It brings with it a lot of challenges, erosion, it accelerates erosion, the human health concerns, we've seen and noticed a lot of loss of fish life, fish kills. It affects tourism for sure because of, we see before visitors come to Placencia, they would take to social media and ask what is the situation of the beach like. And of course, when traveling, you have choices on destination. And this is a huge concern for people traveling. Not fortunate, but why tourism, I think, is still happening in Placencia is because we have other things to offer. Like I mentioned earlier, the marine parks, we have inland tours. It's quite easily accessible from Placencia. However, there's lots of other destinations that are facing the same problem. So we really have to just do all we can to manage the sargassum influx. Livelihood is definitely impacted as well. Fishing, our next speaker or later on, Mr. Ewert is an avid fly fisher. Even our snorkeling in sargassum is not so much fun. So it does affect our livelihood. Our commercial fishers, sports fishing is impacted by sargassum. It's a huge issue. Placencia, like Caye Caulker, is developing really fast. And because of our lack of policies when it comes to determining and having a say in the way in which our community is being developed, was very limited. I'm very pleased to tell you all that the land use policy, which is a framework that is recent or should come into effect very soon, will allow us and the community to have a little more say in the way our community is being developed. Even though nature is climate change and other forces of nature are really causing a havoc, the man-made changes to our environment development is also important for us to address in terms of the challenges that we're facing. We are very conscious in Placencia about our green spaces. We do have a few areas we work and lobby with government to really preserve and keep as a green space. We're very active now in working with organizations such as the World Wildlife Fund to protect our lagoon, the Placencia Lagoon, and putting it into some form of protection status, which would preserve the mangrove ecosystems there especially, and marine life in there. Our community is definitely a very resilient one, and we have seen changes from huge hurricane, Iris 20 years ago, and from all indications, we are very conscious of our efforts to address these things in planning. So, yeah, thank you all.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Warren. And as a reminder, we will have Q&A for the remaining panelists at the end of all of their presentations. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce Ms. Elise Noble. She's the Senior Communications Director for Oceania Belize. In her presentation, she's going to talk to us more about some of the public engagement and advocacy for marine resources that Oceania has been doing in Belize. So with that, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks so much. You'll be advancing my slides, yes?
Yes. And
Okay.
you can just tell me click. I'm also keeping a timer. So if
Yeah.
I switch forward, I promise we want to hear the information, but we do want to leave enough time for discussion as well.
No worries. We should be quick, but thanks so much. Good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on wherever you are. My name is Elise Noble, and I'm the Senior Communications Director at Oceania. When we talk about safeguarding Belize's marine resources, we're not just talking about fish or coral reefs or mangroves. We're talking about livelihoods, food security, culture, and the future of our country. Next slide, please. Yeah. In Belize, the sea is central to life. Thousands of people depend directly on fisheries for income. Tourism, one of our biggest economic drivers, relies on healthy reefs and habitats. Our marine ecosystems also act as a natural protection for our coastlines, especially as climate impacts increase. So when we protect the sea, we're protecting communities. But these resources are under real pressure. Overfishing, illegal fishing, threatened fish stocks, the threat of offshore oil exploration, which poses serious environmental risks, is ever looming. We're also seeing degradation of coral reefs and mangroves from dredging and unsustainable coastal development projects, alongside the growing impacts of climate change. Sargassum is evident, coral bleaching. These challenges make action urgent. At Oceana, mobilizing to safeguard marine resources means turning awareness into action. We work across 4 key areas: advocacy, pushing for strong national policies, community engagement, working alongside fishers and coastal communities, public campaigns, building national support for conservation, science, ensuring that decisions are based on evidence. Mobilization is really about people power, bringing together voices to influence change. And this approach has led to real impact. Belize has secured protections against offshore oil activity via a moratorium that can only be lifted via a national referendum, which means that Belizeans must approve. We've strengthened fisheries management and transitioned away from destructive fishing practices like gill nets and trawling. And we've helped build a national movement where citizens actively support marine conservation, our wave makers. Most importantly, communities are increasingly empowered to advocate for their own resources. Through our work, this is the total area that we protected through the offshore oil moratorium and our trawling ban and gill net ban. And just to share that even if you're not from Belize, there are important lessons here. First, a healthy ocean is not separate from the economy, it is the economy. Second, policy change is possible when people mobilize and stay engaged. Third, conservation only works when communities are part of the solution. One of the key lessons from Belize is that how we define and implement the blue economy really matters. At its best, the blue economy should balance environmental protection with sustainable livelihoods. But in practice, that balance isn't always easy to achieve. You know, in Belize, many people, fishers, tour guides, coastal communities already depend on healthy marine ecosystems in sustainable ways. Their livelihoods are directly tied to the long-term health of these habitats. At the same time, we're seeing increasing pressure from coastal development, including projects in critical habitats. So the question becomes development for whom and at what cost? Belize shows us that progress is possible, but it's never finished. There are always ongoing challenges that require continued attention. The blue economy is also just not about growth. It's also about how that growth is distributed. You don't have to be from Belize to be able to be a part of protecting what Belize represents. The future of our oceans really do depend on informed, engaged global citizens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No, that was very informative. We appreciate it. Our next panelist is Mr. GARBUTT, who is the president of the Belize Flat Fishery Association, as well as a community advocate and so many other labels. So he's going to talk to us more about some sustainable livelihoods, fly fishing, and stewardship of the marine resources. He does have a quick video, so I'll go ahead and play that first.
The deep love for the people and country of Belize is what motivates and drives me. I will stand tall and never back down for anything that affects them negatively. But what drives me as well is hope that these initiative, Silk Key, Monkey River, and just the way you live your life, plant the seed of patriotism and when it comes to civil pride. How do I feel being recognized as a Belizean patriot? Man, I'm forever grateful to even be standing, sitting, or shaking hand of someone who they consider that. So when they say about me, I have to look deep. And I believe I'm capable, but I'm not capable without the people that support me. And this is not, it's probably easier for you guys to pick a name. But this award is for the people that backed me.
Great. You were
So I could go ahead. Good morning and thanks. Good morning and thanks. I could go ahead.
Oh, yes. All yours. Floor is yours.
Okay, good. Because I see anytime you talk about the heavy talker, it was directed to me. So I'll try my best. Only kidding around. Everybody, thanks and welcome, and really, really great. I think it's more than an honor just to have technical science and a commonly science man like me around the panel with such great panelists. All these guys were outstanding, and from the Chairlady to our chairman here and all the other presenter, kudos. I'm so forever grateful to be born in one of the most blessed country when it comes to natural resource, because we are a nature-based economy. And more than that, I always like to share. I'm not someone that is brag, but that have too much bragging. But Belize is start from the when you open your eye about conservation. Before I know the word conservation, I was living it. We'll never pick the conch out of season, out of size, or more than we need. Unfortunately, our neighbor is not that privileged to have brought up that way. So just to give you a little overview to think of some of the channels we have, which is enforcement being number one. But we must enforce ourselves to be better steward of this great land that God have blessed us with. So for me, as the president of the Belize Flat Fishery Association, I've been directly involved with conservation from directly 2000 when we try to make tide down in Punta Gorda. And we have made a lot of good strides. Like Alyssa said about the gillnet ban, myself was directly involved. We did the catch and release for the 3 species, was directly involved. And now as the Belize Flat Fishery, what we're doing now is whenever you talk about overfish or not enough fish, think about habitat. We have all these marine spaces, but no one directly protecting the habitat. So we're echoing, and not just echoing, having meeting with government directly concerning protecting all the flats from Rio Hondo to Sarstoon from 4 major threats: deforestation of mangrove, dredging over the water structure, and jet skis. That's our us, and it's going fruitful. We have our 3rd meeting was yesterday at 10 o'clock at the fisheries, and we have people from DOE, the fisheries department, coastal zone, mining, you name it, they were there. And it's very important for us not to lose sight that without habitat, there is nothing. So I just want to specify on that, saying that it's like a grand slam when you fly fish, which Belize is one of the number 1 country in the world for it. Gillnet ban is huge. The protected of the 3 species is huge, and now you're going to protect where the fish have a chance to strive and grow up. So just wanted to share that when I have this great audience here. But I must say something as someone when we talk about the blue bond or the blue economy. It's a nice thing to say a debt for nature swap. But as much as the chairman doing so much and everyone doing so much for erosion, what we cannot afford to erode is do for self or do for country. Sometime when these money come in, it sounds almost like monopoly money. It's so much in numbers, but intangible thing that we could feel and touch. I am a bottom-up approach guy. I go around and shake hand and meet people, and I have no heading more than just being Ewart GARBUTT, a Belizean that will forever be a Belizean. And when you talk at the people from bottom of the sea and the everyday people like myself, they're not feeling it when it comes to all of these money coming to our country. We have an international panel. Trust me, we're doing great strive. Could we do more? That's where this discussion is going. Could we touch more people? Not with words, because a lot of the entities are doing better with rhetoric. They're writing a better script, but the writing could almost put down the pen. And instead of trying to see results, small, tangible one, I'll share one. You have the fisheries department, for instance. We have a quota for conch, which is great. That was science-based. Does it make sense to say that we close the conch season for Belizean while the Guatemalans still have no end to the quota? Do you get support from your local while you pressure more the scale fish that we depend on for health to eat? Because we don't eat as much lobster and conch, but we eat the scale fish. The same guys that used to fish for conch, because of that 2-week early close season, they're pressuring already pressure stock called scale fish. But on paper, that seems good when we present it on the Blue Bun or wherever it is. But while I'm saying I'll try to not be long-winded and almost over is we need to do something. And I love the presentation, Maya and everyone. That was, on the end, it said it's about connecting the local where their involvement is equally shared. I see it as equal. Being here on this panel, we're equal. Not just be equal on a panel or when it's a discussion, but let's live that. We have a lot of data that is just on this, that is gathering up cobweb. We need these data for myself and others to be stored. In our meeting yesterday, I asked the Department of Environment, do you have a record for the water quality of San Pedro proper or anywhere where we could learn? You have a vehicle, if you could see your gauge going down and it's getting hot, you could know we're a hot point. So if we destroyed 80% of an area of mangrove, we know that the water quality or etc. Too many people, but we have all these data, but we don't have anything on our dashboard to say our tank is almost empty or we're in the red. And I just want to say, for ending, for me, it's a privilege. The time will never be enough because this conversation is always something that even when we get it right, we still haven't, we can't stop, we can't slow down, because rightfully it's for the next generation, and it's a privilege to have shared this forum here with the amazing people and the students. I apologize if sometimes it comes off in Creole, but I speak best in what I dreamed in, my native language, Belize. But I love to be the steward, to be, not just love to be, it's my obligation. I have got everything from the ocean. So they said, too much is given, much is expected. For me, who everything is given, everything is expected for me to give back to my lovely Belize and its environment. So with that said, I try my best to be under 5 minutes. But thanks so much. And I think together we could achieve any and everything. Thanks so much.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And yes, we will have more time for conversation and questions after our final presentation. And with that in mind, last but certainly not least is Mr. Wilbur Dunn, who is the co-founder and CEO of Belize Blue Nutrients. And he is going to talk more about us about blue enterprise and innovation and livelihoods. And with that, I turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm very grateful to be a part of this panel to, as well, echo what the other panelists have said, just joining such a fantastic group. And I know many of them personally, so it's a pleasure. Yeah, but just to share with you before we jump into the video. So we are a private company, but we are a private company here that's working ultimately towards being a B Corp. Right? It's not just about sheer capitalism, making all the money and just forgetting about everyone and the environment. As a matter of fact, my involvement in this company really, the roots of it started in Placencia, and some of them, some of the panelists will tell you the Placencia Cooperative, which I'm still engaged with, it was an integral part of the village. And they were one of the first ones to try to diversify the income because they saw the challenges with dwindling fish stocks. And while tourism is fantastic and it can earn revenue and all of that, not everyone can make that transition from fishing to tourism. And not you can't take all fish out of water and expect them to live. That's not what that's not how it works. So our company really started a few years ago, but conceptually, when the Placencia Cooperative, we were working and looking at how best can we leverage our natural resources in two ways. One, to grow this alternative or supplementary livelihood, which is seaweed farming, and two, to have that seaweed farm serve as habitat and provide all these benefits back to the environment instead of just being an extractive activity. We are fortunate that we applied we were invited to apply for a grant from the Belize Fund. And, we thought about it and we said, well, we're a private company. These types of grants are really meant for mass benefits across the country. As many people, as Ewart said, you touch as many people as possible with tangible results. And we said, well, let's apply and see how best we can be that leverage point for the industry to go from a nascent industry to one that's actually viable, because we've been trying this for 20 plus years. I can tell you it's been quite some time. But the video itself will share our project and what we're doing. Hopefully I have a little bit of time after, maybe even 15 seconds to share, but let's jump into it, and you'll see what we're working with.
All right, we will see after the video.
The goal of the project is to create a self-financing, sustainable, and mature seaweed industry for Belize.
So the 5 objectives of this project are to develop the comprehensive quality control training program, to train and certify 22 individuals using that program, to develop and market 2 new seaweed value-added products to help diversify income and contribute to the new seaweed industry fund. And of course, we're going to create the blueprint of the seaweed industry fund to allow for future capitalization. And finally, we're going to promote collaboration and garner support from the Ministry of Home Affairs and New Growth Industries. By doing so, we're going to be contributing to the development of the mariculture sector, which has been identified as a priority for development under numerous plans and strategies for Belize. We're going to be tackling the issue of low seaweed quality and also a lack of sustainable financing for small-scale farmers. This project aligns very well with Belize Fund thematic area number 4. We're going to be teaching farmers how to maintain quality once they've harvested the seaweed, and that includes how they deal with the transport vessel, how they deal with the harvest equipment, how they deal with the drying, and making sure it's not under-dried, over-dried, or not subjected to bacterial or chemical contamination, all of the things that would otherwise negatively impact the quality of the seaweed. In addition to the training in quality control, we're also going to be creating a new and sustainable source of financing, and we're coining it as a Seaweed Industry Fund. That fund will provide grants to farmers to start up farms, to rehabilitate farms, and it will also provide strategic grants to support organizations.
Where this project is going to be focused or based is primarily in Independence. However, there will be several site visits to Turnef in Saddle Key or Channel Key area and Lark Key. So we're often asked about, sustainability and replication of these types of projects. The innovative collaborative process that we're going to implement will see revenues from the sale of the newly created value-added products continually feed into the Seaweed Industry Fund, right? And we have the ability to add new products that feed even more into the fund. Now, in terms of the training, the program will have been embedded within the structure of Blue Nutrients as a company, so we will continue to offer that under our extension services. And of course, we can expand the program as new technologies and stuff come to the forefront.
Wonderful. So thank you for sharing that video with us. Just for the sake of time, I am gonna go ahead and jump into the Q&A. However, please feel free to add in more information, and this is for all of the panelists, as you're answering your questions. So with that in mind, I am first going to turn it over to the class for any questions that they have, just because I know during part 1, y'all didn't really have an opportunity to ask all of your questions. You're currently mute. I see that you're talking, Frank, but I cannot hear you.
Held out now.
Oh, yep.
Well,
Wonderful.
first, I want to give a round of applause to the speaker. Thank you very much. And wonder if anybody has a question? Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, I'm outside of the frame, but I'm all the way to the left on your screen. Thank you so much, everyone, for your talks and presentations. My parents went to Belize recently and went boat fishing, so I think that was a great experience for them. And so I grew up near Key West, where as long as I can remember, sargassum has washed ashore on our beaches, which are not well known for lounging and things like that. But I was just wondering if any of you guys have been in contact with people in Florida or in the Keys who kind of work on mitigating this issue, as obviously as climate change gets worse and causes these issues.
I can give a little update on what we're doing here. Belize has what is called a sargassum task force, which is made up of all the relevant government agencies, the Department of the Environment, the Fisheries Department, Coastal Zone Management, even the Weather Bureau, and the Belize Tourism Board, of course. So there's a lot of collaboration with other destinations. I know Mexico, there's technical exchanges that are done quite regularly. There's a lot of communication with some of the developers of different methods that are used to track them. A big challenge we're facing is the cost of accessing these barriers and other specialized equipment. So, but there is, to answer your question, there is definitely collaboration with other destinations.
I have a question. Also, thank you all for all of your presentations. It's been really interesting hearing all of your different perspectives and experiences. But my question is, I guess, more directed for Alicia with Oceana. I was just wondering a little if you could tell us a little bit more about the process of banning trawling or gill nets in Belize and kind of what that looks like from a policy standpoint.
Yes, thank you. Actually, it's funny that you asked that because before Oceana came to Belize in 2009, gill nets was one of the things that, you know, fishers had been advocating for banning and phasing out since 1997. There are lots of petitions, lots of work, you know, that the local fishers were putting in to say this is a destructive gear and we need to get rid of it. You know, it was something that was supposed to, I don't want to say be maybe easier, but something that was maybe less challenging as opposed to something like offshore oil. But that policy change and that transition away from gill nets took very long for us to be able to do. And really, I think one of the big things there was just being able to collaborate and work with a lot of stakeholders, build awareness for, you know, fishing generally, and you know, what does destructive gear mean? What does this mean to the everyday person? What, you know, how do we get fish? How do we look at all of these things? So working with communities, working with people, technocrats, general public, in terms of looking at what the impacts are, and then also how we can support fishers in terms of the transition away from this gear, legally registered fishers. And it took us quite a bit of time. We didn't secure that legislation until 2020, I believe. So it was quite a bit, but in terms of trawling, we were able to work with the cooperatives who were the ones that used the trawling for shrimp. And we had purchased the vessels for those, and we got rid of trawling actually, I think in 2010, if I'm not mistaken. So that one didn't take too long. I think the destructiveness of that sort of fishing practice was fairly evident, and we had you know, willing partners. Fishers had seen the writing on the wall. I think those of you from Placencia are familiar with Japs, who, you know, may he rest in peace. Definitely a character, but he used to work on the trawler, and locally he gave a lot of, you know, testimony and bore witness to the fact that, you know, of how destructive it was. And, you know, having stories from persons like that, you know, who shared so passionately and personally, I think really was helpful in terms of being able to communicate to people, to policymakers, to the technocrats, what this meant for them as well. So I think, you know, to answer your question very succinctly, I think it's just being able to collaborate with a variety and a diverse group of stakeholders, especially the public, but the users primarily, the fishers. And I think those were the biggest sort of critical points. And now we have legislation that currently have, you know, gill nets and trawling as destructive gear that aren't allowed in Belize's EEZ.
I'd like to follow up on that question, if I may, with a question maybe for Mr. GARBUTT, Warren GARBUTT. And you mentioned that there's some tension there between the local governance and other levels of governance. And we would like to get, if you can tell us a little bit about how you would like to see policy developed locally, and how do you balance that with policy developed in another place where you may not have influence or a voice?
Yes, so that is, like I mentioned, one of our biggest challenge, our lack of autonomy at the local level. It's just the way the government system is structured in Belize. We do have an area representative who should be directly involved with helping us, a ministry that is dedicated to look after the affairs of each village and see what they need. Our next step, I think, what would improve our ability to address these issues is becoming a town, and that has been some in discussion, but there's a lot of political will for these things to happen. There are other requirements for us to become a town, but that would enable us to have a bit more say in every little factors that are affecting us, addressing our shoreline in terms of development, having more say. As it is, for somebody to apply, for example, just for a building permit, they don't come to the local council. They would have to go to Belmopan. And those people are not on the ground. So similar to what GARBUTT was saying, the enforcement and monitoring on the ground is difficult because these departments are not present in the village. And so there's a lot of lobbying that we have to do. There's an interesting system I want to share very quick. These can be achieved even without us becoming a town. Ms. SELENY is not here, but as you noticed in her presentation, she was able to improve her financial or her income generating tactics simply because of legislations that allowed them to collect traffic and property taxes. We are not that fortunate, but it's, like I said, political will. And it's something that we just have to lobby for to get more autonomy to influence the change and development here.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for your presentation. It was really nice. I actually have a question for eWorks. And I don't think this was mentioned in the presentation, but it was just my own curiosity. What was the result of the protest that you held at Wilbur's Flat, and how can community members participate in ongoing issues that directly affect them?
Thanks for the question. Wilbur Flat is one that is documented for history, and it's really even have the conversation saying flats. It made so much awareness where when you go and you meet people like myself, I've been privileged that, oh, Mr. GARBUTT, I heard. I didn't even know what was a flat. The conversation of flat, what's the important. So it's stand tall. We're the country of Belize. Unfortunately, we have to spend out of our wallet, the government, to pay back these people to gain back our land. So yes, it's a win, but it comes with a little price financially. But it's also a set of precedents whereby they know that community could get things done. And I stand tall always behind the community, knowing the strongest force is the unity of the community. So that's what Wilbur Flat is. And to go further, like in my presentation, I talk about protecting the habitat, the flats fishing. We have about 70% of where we fly fish is protected. But protected from what? It's protected from not habitat loss. You could still dredge, and there's 3 different stages of protection in Belize. You got the full protection, the medium, and general, which is general use zone, and the medium protection. The reason I said this is even only in the full protection conservation zone, that's where it's less than, we were doing a calculation yesterday, it's less than 1% of the flats that we fish, they can't dredge or they can't cut a mangrove. Everything else is wide open. So I go back to the question that will Bauer Flat set a precedence to know that the important and that community will stand up when get threatened. So thanks for the question, if that answer you.
Thank you.
So minor interruption. I don't want the flow of questions to go. However, I know that Alicia does have to leave us soon. So I did want to go ahead and tell her thank you so much for joining us today. I know she shared her contact information with us, so we'll be sure to pass that on. So if you have any questions, she's more than willing to answer them. So.
Kris-An, there's a question for Liz in the chat.
Okay, do you have time for maybe one question? I know you said you have to hop off soon, but the question in the chat was, are there any major studies on key systems beneath the islands over the past few visits? I understand a school had collapsed back in the past. Oh no, this was for the Caye Caulker Chairlady. Sorry, I was reading the wrong question.
Yeah, those are the questions there. It seems like there's several questions in one. So
yeah,
I was just trying to say, just
yes.
For full transparency, we're doing some meetings with fishers in different coastal communities or fishing communities, and so I have to head out to the next one. So that's why I have to hop off. But in terms of policy measures to better protect mangroves and seagrass beds, and a way for private NGOs or local communities to formally oppose or prevent development projects that disrupt these ecosystems. Honestly, I think that's the approach. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we do have laws, but enforcement is very weak on these, and we don't get a lot of transparency in terms of, development projects and how they're approved necessarily. Land use is a big issue. We've heard SELENY, Ms. Pott, talk about it in her presentation a little bit in terms of what Caye Caulker is currently facing in terms of the police station, that being, potentially sold and not aware. And she's the chairman of the village. And she also having to ask, like, what's going on with property that's in her village. Mr. GARBUTT talking about, sort of the structure that exists between local and national policy. And that's part of the challenge, is that a lot of approvals and permits are given, and communities don't have necessarily the direct oversight for who, how, what, when those happen. Those are sometimes national decisions that get made many times. And there's not a lot of detail or clarity around that. So it does require unfortunately, a case-by-case sort of response, which, I think has been framed to say, oh, these persons are anti-development, or they don't want to see these things happen, which is unfortunate, because these ecosystems and these habitats, like Mr. GARBUTT, you were rightfully mentioned with Will Bauer, are providing for fly fishers, are providing for tour guides, are providing for people as is. Destroying those seagrass beds, destroying those mangroves would change, the ability of these, Belizeans, these users that benefit from those ecosystems and those habitats as is, to then be dependent on some sort of, I don't know, hotel or some sort of model that would say, okay, well, let me employ you, and instead of you being your own agent and employing, you employing your own people and making money for yourself. So right now, I think the approach we've seen is we've have to tackle it on a case-by-case basis. And communities have become increasingly vocal. There's numerous examples of people pushing back in terms of Cayo Rosario. But what we're trying to do in the interim, absence of, because we have great laws, it's enforcement. We've seen a major, I think, shift in terms of collaboration at a national level. Lots of stakeholders, NGOs, I see some of them in the audience right now, a lot of critical players coming together to say, hey, we don't like what's going on with this project. We need more. If it's a port project, where, this is what we need. These are the things, these are our positions. and making use of positions where we do have any sort of influence, like on the National Environmental Appraisal Committee, we have an NGO rep, and trying to make sure that we, you know, channel information on concerns via that route to make things known. So it's really, you know, a multi-pronged approach, unfortunately, at this point, but we're also trying to mobilize, and there are organizations working on a seagrass policy as well, to be able to see, you know, how we manage that and how we move forward. But it's not a clear answer, unfortunately. It's very complex, but it is something that's a priority area for all of us, and something that we're actively working on and prioritizing as we move forward. But thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions anyone else may have for me or for us afterwards. And this is such a meaningful conversation and discussion. I'm sorry I have to cut it short, but really, really pleased to have been a part of it and invited to present today. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us today. So again, we'll share out her information so you can do follow-ups, as well as if you have any questions for her, please feel free to share them in the chat. And after this, we will be answering these questions via the Strong Coast Facebook page. So with that, I will turn it back over to the class to see if there are any other final questions before I move on to some of the online questions.
Yeah, I have another question. Anybody here? Monique, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question for Wilbur. I know that you mentioned that the Belize Blue Nutrients organization is recently formed. I wonder what were some of the major challenges you've experienced so far, and how, if at all, the government could assist in alleviating some of those challenges?
All right, thank you, man. Well, as a startup, I think our entire startup life is big challenges, right? But one of the main ones I think is just, and it's not so much an internal thing; it's for the industry itself. Like I mentioned in my talk, we had, I think, at least 2 decades trying to build this industry, right? And we have a fantastic quality product because we have a fantastic environment and great people who are, you know, not damaging the environment, but the world did not know about our product. So one of the first challenges we had was how to scale without damaging the environment. Now, as a company, we depend on the producers from Riverdale, Placencia, all across the country, right? But how can they scale and supply to us without damaging the environment? That's the first one. We looked at it from a more of a collaborative standpoint, right? The fisheries department, DOE, and all the other social partners and government partners are overseeing some of the implementation on the ground. I mean, you can't just go and, for instance, clear seagrass bed to put your seaweed farm. That's not allowed. You can't have your seaweed farm on coral reef. But then what it does, it limits the amount of area that they can produce. So what we do as a company is provide extension services in terms of site selection, or smart siting, as we call it, right? And that has to do with not just ensuring that we don't damage the environment, but ensuring that the area that they do farm can be productive so that they can actually earn an income, because we don't want it to be another 20 years that, you know, people are looking at this and it's like, oh, but we're not really making money. Now, the next challenge, and the next major challenge, was how do we get the world to know that we have the best product and get them to buy? Because there's tons of cheap seaweed from Vietnam, Indonesia, and these countries, and they have the scale. They have 1 million people farming, like in Indonesia. We could never compete in quantity. It would be a losing battle right out the gate. So the challenge was then, how do we show them our quality? How do we get them to buy into this? And just to share, it's not just about selling this product, it's about selling the story behind the product. So when it comes to, you know, some of what we've been discussing about not damaging the environment and protecting these species, these ecosystem, that's all a part of that story that we then use internationally to sell the product, right? And that then puts the owners to some degree back on the producers to ensure that they're not damaging the environment, because if they're damaging the environment, then we can't work with them, right? And also, if they're damaging the environment, ultimately they will end up losing productivity, because that's how it goes hand in hand. So those are two of the main challenges. The third and final one that I'll say is just financing, right? Financing has been very, very tricky. I mean, I have a business partner from the US. So internally, we have the financing, but as an industry, we don't have the financing, right? They can't go to Development Finance Corporation, Belize Bank, or one of these banks and say, look, I need $50,000, $20,000, $10,000 to start my farm, because they're going to ask them, well, what collateral do you have? And if you're talking about benefiting the people who are the most marginalized to some degree, they don't have the resources, they don't have the collateral needed. And this is exactly why, as a part of our project, we're building what we've coined the Seaweed Industry Fund, so that we can provide those microfinancing without them having to, sell their kidneys to try to, or put up their houses or that sort of stuff. But I mean, the other challenges that we were facing, like the whole governance framework, which is the policy and the regulation for the industry, those things are being dealt with, right? But I would say we have the challenges, but we are overcoming them. So there will be a very different seaweed industry in Belize in the next 3 to 5 years. But again, people don't always think, look, I'm gonna hammer it out for the next 5 years. Most people just want to hammer it out for today, and I'll take a break after that. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. So as I'm looking at the clock right now, I know that we are almost at the end of our meeting. So I will turn it over to the class for one final question before I move on to the 2 questions that we have remaining online.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Dubon, for the answer, because it links to what we talked about last week in this class on Belizing the blue economy, and that was financing, and especially blue bonds and biodiversity credits and other types of financing schemes that may be in some cases coming from the outside, but we heard from some that were some funding and financial efforts locally in Belize. But we were wondering, what are the benefits and the cons of some of these blue bond and biodiversity financing schemes?
All right. Is that a general question, or was that direct?
General question, but since you brought up
all right. Well, I think one of the like I mentioned, and Belize Fund or just small grants program, all of them can respond to this, but the scale at which they need to operate administratively is just too big for most of our grassroots individuals, right? And not all individuals want to be a part of a formal group to be able to access these funds. Not everyone wants to be a part of an association and cooperative. You do have people who want to be the Lone Ranger, right? So then it goes back to what I was saying, that what about all these collateral that they need to put up for it. But I do think the strength is that, like in our case with the grant from the Belize Fund, that is a bridge for us to develop the Seaweed Industry Fund, right? So that's a critical part for us to then create the enabling environment, or create the programs that we then don't need to go back to the Belize Fund, or the farmers don't need to worry about accessing financing because something exists. Now, I understand there is a similar program out in Thailand, for instance, where it is a revolving fund. It is a fund for the industry. It's microfinancing, and it all goes back into growing the fund, expanding it to more and more people. But it is difficult. It's not something that we can just create overnight. And in our case, we're trying to finance it without asking for endless funding from donors, for instance. I mean, each funding from each donor comes restricted or lightly restricted, and they have their own agenda for that. Whereas us, we being on the ground or in the water in this case, see our needs specifically, but they don't always align with what their bigger goals are, right? So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. So with that in mind, I am going to start moving over to some of the online questions, just so we're able to fit as much of it in as possible. So this one is to you, Mr. GARBUTT, for Ewart. The person asks, in your opinion, what key gaps exist in this country's approach to managing and preventing development threats to flat ecosystems? For example, Cayo Rosario and San Pedro, the community doesn't want that development to happen, but the government isn't listening to what the community wants.
Very, very excellent question. And I think at the meeting yesterday, one of my concern, and I was privileged to even brought it out at the symposium in November last year in Fort Lauderdale, is how do we educate the investor is very important. Very, very important. The investor need to know no rightful investor, no one that is looking for long term will destroy the very thing they're depending on. You're placing a bet on a dead horse. You will want that horse to be vibrant. If you're placing a bet that your horse is going to win, you want them with the best feed, the best water, and the best everything. So how do we as a nation start from the bottom? Us, the everyday people, when we meet a guest in our fly fishing boat, and he said, I'm thinking of opening a lodge. Educate that guest. Educate him. How we get the realtor to not sell dreams that turn nightmare. And the hardest one, how we get the government that each of them have a back door to every one of their room to know that responsible governance depend on the ecosystem being intact. So to answer that, definitely we have led, I think it's my good friend Alyssa from Oceana. We have already put in the puzzle together where we got the community energy and synergy, getting people to be singing the same tune. And I must say, I'm very hopeful that we're turning the corner for long-term sustainability for our next generation. And these same very investor going to help us lead that way. That's the win that I see.
Wonderful. Thank you for that response. And then our last question of our presentation and panel today is towards you, Warren. In regards to the Placencia Village Council, given the importance of mangroves and seagrass beds in Placencia, has the Village Council explored blue carbon initiatives such as carbon credit projects? These projects could help safeguard critical coastal ecosystems while creating a sustainable source of income for the community.
We haven't, to answer directly, but there's a challenge with that. The main challenge is that majority of the land is privately owned. We have very few public spaces or government-owned land, especially in the lagoon area on both sides. So it would have to be an effort led by the government. Like I mentioned in my presentation, the drive by the World Wildlife Fund to create some sort of protection status. So buying back some of those spaces that are not yet developed can definitely add towards seeing how we can benefit from them in other ways, like yes, the carbon credits and all the other functions that they provide. So it is a challenge not being able to do what we want with these systems in terms in ecosystem in terms of protection.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. All right, I'm looking at the time. All right, does anyone have any final quick questions from the class? Because we have 3 more minutes. No? All right, well, thank you, everyone. So please join me in again thanking all of our panelists for joining us today for our part 2 of the Blue Bond initiative session. And again, if you do have any questions that come up at a later date, we will be responding to all of these questions via our Facebook page. So as you can see, our if you're not following us on the Strong Coast Cope Facebook page, please go ahead. You can either scan that QR code or just Google us, Strong Coast Cope on Facebook, and you will find us. We will also be sending out more information as well as the recording from this panel today. So again, I thank you all for joining us and spending your mornings or afternoons, depending on where you're located, with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.